Hello and thanks for joining today. We are going to do a preview of Financial Edge NXT and focus on tracking of projects and grants in the system. My name is Peter Saul. I'm with Capital Business Solutions. I'll be navigating us through the preview today. I'm first starting off on the home page of Financial Edge NXT, and I can show you here under General Ledger that this is where we would set up both projects and grants. And as I'm tracking projects and grants in the system, I can use them on transactions. I have an account that I can use on the transaction, also the project, and also the grant. So some organizations only need the capability of tracking projects or grants, or they can track their grants as projects. If you also need to have grants that fund different projects, it's good to use both parameters, both the project and grant parameter, to track that relationship on your transactions. I'm going to return to the home screen here, and we're going to go under Analysis Dashboards. And as you can see, I have multiple tabs that I like to work with on the system. Makes you capability to really go back and forth very quickly. This is a dashboard that's really focused on projects. I also have a dashboard over here that's focused on grants. So I can use these dashboards to do a lot of analysis. Dashboards are available to full users in the system, but we also have a license called a view-only user that gives the users access to dashboards. So a view-only user might be a project manager, or it might be somebody internally, a grant manager, that's responsible for doing this type of analysis. So on the screen here at the top of the dashboard, I have different filters that I can pick and choose from. The first one here is the date filter, where I can pick or drag and drop or key in dates for the time period I want to analyze. And then I have different filters like project type. If I want to look at a certain type of project, I have project IDs where I can pick and choose individual projects. But even aside from that, if I'm a view user and you've enforced security, you can restrict me down to specific projects. And then when I come into the screen here, it would restrict me to just see the projects that I have the ability to analyze and look up. On this list right here at the bottom of the screen, you can see the report actually starts with a starting balance, revenues, expenses, gifts, transfers, net change, and an ending balance. So the starting balance would be restricted monies that carry forward if it's a restricted grant or there's monies left over on the project. On the bottom of the screen here, I can see different descriptions. If I drill into a number, like the project ID, it'll give me a quick view of the project over on the right-hand side. I can go to different areas like contact information very quickly, or I can open up the full view of the project very easy with a mouse click. If I want to do additional analysis on amounts, I can drill into the name of the project here, Pet for the Elderly project, and that takes me down to the accounts that make up the balance that I'm analyzing on the dashboard. From here, again, I can drill into the project ID, and then from the project ID, even look at the full record, which is going to give me a lot of information about the project. Name up at the top, activity for any of the fiscal years I have on the system. If I have attachments for my project, those would be accessible here. I can keep notes and actions. Actions would be to assign duties, such as reporting duties, to other users on the system. And I have the ability to really scroll down and look at the different months. I'm going to drill into August, where I see I have amounts in August. We'll go ahead and we'll drill in. And that takes me a layer down to the accounts that have balances in August. And from there, I can drill another layer down, and that's going to take me down to the transactions. And I could see that these different transactions are a source of an invoice, so they're accounts payable invoices. I can get back to the individual transaction just by clicking on the transaction ID there. So this is back to the invoice or source document that created the transaction. So as a viewer, I have a lot of ways to get to supporting information. From this screen, I can look to see if it was paid. I see it was paid with check 2032. I can also look at the distribution on how the invoice was charged out or prorated. And I can also look at different attachments. Like here's an attachment of an invoice. So as you put invoices into the system to be paid, you could look at those attachments as you do your analysis. And here's just an example of an invoice that was scanned and put into the system for me. So back to source documentation, which is always nice and great for people reviewing. So in summary, we started at the dashboard with our analysis and drilled all the way back to transactions in August to the supporting details such as a copy of the actual invoice that we paid to the vendor. Can look up payment information, could see how that invoice was allocated or distributed to different accounts. So great way to get analysis and get everyone in your organization on the same page. We'll take a look now at other things that you can do. If I come into a list of projects, and I have my project list open right here, I have a list, and now this list can be used to do many different things in the system. For example, as a user, I could, order the columns the way I want the columns to be ordered. I can sort by the column headings. So if in this case I want all the types to be organized together, I can do that. I can do a wildcard search on the project. So if I was looking for something of my golf projects, I can certainly do that, and you can see it found a golf gala and annual golf outing, so 2 projects there. To clear that wildcard filter, very easy, just X out of it, takes me back. So to see the different columns of information, each user can kind of personalize their own screen. So moving around columns or choosing the columns you want to see is not impacting other users. Maybe I want to see projects that I have attachments. I want to see who created the project, whether the project was active, and I can add all those pieces of information onto the screen, and it'll be added by columns. From this screen, I also can drill into projects. So if I want to work my way through a list, I can do view, which is going to give me a view of the record of the project, where I can see all those tabs that we talked about before. Now this project has some more information on it. It has notes and actions, so nice to be able to look up that information right on the project as you manage your data. And we'll return from the projects back to the dashboards, and we'll take a look at a grant dashboard. Very similar to the project dashboard, it has filters up at the top of the screen, followed by summary information and more detailed information as it works down. So I can put in filters based on post dates. I can pick specific grants that I want to look at right up at the top of the screen. I can look at both active and not yet posted activity. And then when I'm reviewing the grants at the bottom of the screen, I can drill into these different grants, like the Head Start Expansion 18 grant, and that shows me the expenses on the grant. And this also shows the relationship between the grant, which is the first column, and the projects that the grant funds in the second column. So if I wanted to see these expenses in more detail, I would go back to the project, because that's where the expense is actually living, is on the project, and I can drill in and take information, look at information just like I did when I was analyzing the projects before. Go ahead and close that down, and we'll move over and just take a look at the grant list. The grant list is just under the project list here. And when I'm in the grant list, just like before with the projects, each user can personalize their screen by choosing columns, moving columns around. So I can pick and choose the different columns of information that I want and apply. And then if I want columns to be moved in different order, I can do that, and I can also sort by columns just by clicking on the column heading very quickly and take a look at different sorts. I also have the wildcard search like I did before, where I can look up HS at seeing the early Head Start expansion grants, and then from these grant records I could drill into the grant records or view the grant cards. And on the grant, we have many tiles of information, contact information. Here's where projects can be listed, showing that this grant is funding specific projects. I can keep attachments like a grant notification letter. Here's the approval for the grants, and keep that right on the record in case anybody has questions. They can drill it directly into it and review the grant approval letter. With grants, it's also important to have your own unique fields, which are the custom fields. So if there's fields of information you want to track about your grants, easy to set those fields up, and then you could enter information directly onto the grant records for the information you want to track. I can add notes and actions. An example of an action might be related to registration, disbursement, or complete documentation. Let's go ahead and must renew the the grant each March. And maybe I will pick a date in March to have this due, and we'll just pick March 1st, and I can assign this to different users on the system. And here's an example of me assigning it over to Allison to do. And we'll go ahead and save that action. And then as Allison's reviewing her actions, she can see these as they become due and perform the steps that are necessary, and then mark the action as being completed. So a lot of information also on the grant records, just like on the project records. Now we'll take a look at some reporting, and when I go into reporting, I'll get a list of all the reports. No longer are reports housed in individual modules. I could come to a single place as a user on Financial Edge NXT and have access to all my reports. So I have an all reports menu. I see recently run reports, also frequently run reports, and then I could make reports that I use commonly and pretty often favorites, so they're easy to access. That's great for those view-only users that may not be in the accounting system that often, and they just want a quick place to come to access the couple of reports that they have marked as favorites. When I run a report, I could hit the ... and choose run. Reports start out blue and then they turn green when they're finished. And then we can take a look at this report, and we'll make it a little bit larger. And you can see this is for my Head Start expansion grant. I'm reporting on the grant term instead of my fiscal year, and I'm reporting November 2018 through October 31st, 2019 versus the prior period as well, and have a variance versus my budget. So just an example of a report. A couple things you can do with the report then is you can export the report, and I can take it to a PDF directly to Excel or Word. Let's assume we're going to take it over to Excel. Sends it over to Excel. It's opened up on my other monitor here, so let me drag that over. And there's an example of the report. Very nice, clean exports to Excel in the NXT version. So if you've had challenges with that in the past, column headings aligned to the columns, a very clean format that it's come over, did a real good job at bringing reports into Excel directly from the report screen. So there's just an example of how you can take something out to a nice tool like Excel. And let's return back and we'll go ahead and we'll close down this report. And just to recap, those view-only users, again, they could run their reports, they can look at dashboards, they can drill into records, just can't change anything, just look up information. So great to do analysis using the view-only license. Yeah, so let's talk about budgeting, which is very important for budgeting on grants and also on projects. I'll go over into General Ledger, into the budgeting menu, and I have budgeting set up here. Budgeting has different scenarios of a budget, so you can do what ifs. What if we get certain funding? We can make that a scenario. All of these scenarios are reportable, so nice to have different scenarios of a budget if that's going to help you with your planning. Just an example of one of the budgets here, we'll go into the Head Start expansion grants budget because we were looking at that earlier. And we'll view this budget. And this is a budget that is really on the grant term versus my fiscal year. So you can see it's starting in November and it goes through October. So nice, budgeting capability based on the grant term rather than on the fiscal year. And you can see the relationship here where I have a budgeting for an account, project, and the grant. So those are the three different components that I have in this setup of a system. And again, we mentioned that you may or may not use both project and grant, but the budgeting capability is there for both. If I choose edit, I could come in here and I can make adjustments to the budget. I've already preloaded this budget. I can add additional rows if there's new accounts I need to budget for. And you can see here that I can come in and I can change specific amounts. So as I come in and I change an amount, I can use that amount and I could distribute it evenly across the periods or by percentage or using a preset table. And then after I distribute it across, if there's seasonal flow, I could come in and I can change individual numbers. And I can do that for one row at a time, or I can do that for several rows at a time. And that would just be a matter of checking those off and then, distributing across. So a lot of tools to help you get your budget into the system quicker. So this is one option, is to work on your budget directly in Financial Edge NXT. Another option for working on your budgets is to work directly in Microsoft Excel. And with Financial Edge NXT, you have the ability to download free add-ins to Microsoft Excel, and that's for a journal entry add-in. So you can do journal entries in Excel, you can create and edit budgets in Excel, you can do distribution sets or distribution tables in Excel, and also put in statistical or unit counts in Excel. And this feeds directly into Financial Edge NXT. It's a live link to Financial Edge NXT. And let's use the create budget entry, and we'll go ahead and we'll edit an existing budget, and we'll look at the budget that we just looked at before, but directly in Microsoft Excel. And we'll pick the Head Start Expansion Grant budget, and we'll click continue, and that pulls it over from Financial Edge right into Excel. We can auto fit some columns to make them wider, and maybe what we need to do is increase our budget when it comes over here. So let's make it $810,000, and we're getting a bigger award than we thought we would be getting. So we need to update that on our budget, and here we'll put in the control total, and now our distribution matches the control total. So nice increase. And we can put that in as a note, and then when we submit it back into Financial Edge NXT, here's where the live link comes into play to pull information in and also to send it back. If I tried to budget for a combination that's not allowed, it would give me an error message at this point, and right at this point it's already sent it into Financial Edge NXT and updated the budget. So I just get a link on screen in Excel here. If I click on that link, it's going to take me back into that budget within Financial Edge NXT. One thing I did not show you up to this point was I actually had to log in when I was in Excel. That's how it knows who I am as a user and what security rights I have and what projects I'm able to budget for. So it's going to read your profile within Financial Edge NXT as you use the budgeting process. So here's what we just changed. We went in and we changed this budget, and we've got a new amount, and we should see nice increase here, and we did. So you could do budgets either in Excel or directly in Financial Edge NXT. Many users that might not be full accounting users, it might be easier to use a tool like Excel to do. So both options exist, and really you can pick your choice as you're going through your budgeting process. Now again, we were budgeting in this example, we're budgeting not only by account, but we're budgeting by project and grant. So there's that relationship where we can budget down to the project grant relationship directly within the budgeting tool and also within Excel. We'll go back to our report, and we will rerun our report here for our Head Start Expansion Grant, and this will give us the ability to look at the updated budget. So again, starts out blue and will turn green when it's complete. And there we go. So let's go ahead and view the report, and we'll make this larger, and we can see this is the budgeted number that we just changed to $9.72 million, and if I come back over, it agrees to the budget. So quick to get budget updates into the system, again, using a tool and an add-in really works hand in hand with Financial Edge NXT and has that live link between Excel and Financial Edge NXT. So hopefully you see some benefits and time savings in using a tool like that as you go through your budgeting process. Now it's always important when you're reporting on your grants to group rows of the report according to the grant recipient and how they want the report to be grouped. So you can see here that this is a grouping that I have. That all comes into play when you're working on your chart organizers. And chart organizers are really layouts or blueprints for reports, and you can have many of them. You can think of this as sitting between your chart of accounts and reports, and it's the layout or the mechanism that's going to group accounts onto the reports the ways you want. So when you're in here, you can create these chart organizers, one obviously for your main organization, but then you can also create them based on your grant recipients as well, grant report recipients as well. So hopefully that gives you the flexibility to report back out to grantors according to what they want to see. Saves a lot of time because you don't have to export things out into Excel and reports out of Excel and piecemeal them together to get it into the layout that the grant recipient wants. Now these chart organizers are already in Financial Edge, but in Financial Edge NXT, they're a little bit easier to learn. And if I take a look at one of these chart organizers, we'll come down to our main one here and just edit it. Here's an example of what it looks like within Financial Edge NXT. And this is, again, the grouping of how I want accounts in rows of the report. It's, very easy, I think, to go through here and really look at what falls into different rows of the report. Here I'm using an advanced feature called Advanced Filters. So different ways to really group things onto the rows. Just from this screen in the chart organizer, I can run validation reports, and I can also test this chart organizer template with a report. So nice to be able to do that directly as you build these chart organizers. So that wraps up on the reporting. I'm going to get into one more area for our presentation today, and that is expense management. So let's come into expenses here, and I'm going to go into manage expenses. Now, expense management is our newest module, and it allows a couple different things. It allows you the ability to track credit card charges or credit card transactions, and it has a live link to your credit card providers. So I could come in here and I could download into Financial Edge NXT the charges that have hit my credit card, and that's really the starting point. So as a user, if I have an organization issued credit card, I can use that credit card, I can download my charges, and then I can work with those charges. And as I work with those charges, I can put on attachments and supporting information for those charges. It can go through a routing of approval, and then ultimately it moves over to the accounts payable office. So let's take a look at that process of the credit cards. So we'll choose work with my charges here. And as I work with my charges, I'm going to pick a credit card. In this case, I've already picked mine, but I also have access to Christy's credit card because I'm a delegate for her, meaning I might work in the office and be responsible for putting in her charges. I would refresh, that would pull down charges since the last time this ran, and then I could click on the new charges and I could start working with those charges. So in this example, I'll come in, this is A+ office supplies, so I'm going to type A+, and I'm going to pick the vendor. I could put in a description, need supplies for big meeting with the board. And then I have an approval rule. Now the approval rule, you can have multiple approval rules. A very common approval rule might be it needs to go to my supervisor for approval. Or there might be a second approval rule that IT equipment that I'm purchasing needs to go to the IT manager or IT director for approval. So you can have these different routings. You can also have routings based on dollar amount as well, and you can have routings where multiple people need to provide an approval. I have a very detailed description here that I can put in, detail out why I need this. All right, and then I get down to the distribution or how it's allocated or expensed to different accounts. And the accounting office can set up expense categories, and expense categories have accounts tied to them. So for example, maybe I'm picking just the equipment account here, and then that's already putting in the general ledger account. So as a person that might not be in the financial system that much, it's easier for me to pick categories rather than having to determine what account it goes to. Very common thing is maybe I need to pick the project. So I'll come in here and I'll pick a project or a grant. In this case, I could also say it relates to a specific grant. And that gets into whether you're using both projects and grants or you're using just projects. In this example, I'm using both projects and grants. And then as I scroll down further, if this needs to be allocated to another area, I can add another distribution line. Or if I'm finished, I could just move on. And at the bottom of the screen here is where I could attach my supporting documents. So I have the ability to put on multiple attachments. Very common to put a receipt there. If I'm using my smartphone, when I get into this area, I could take a picture that will go right into the drag and drop zone and be attached to the record here. So nice to have, again, that supporting information. If I'm not using my smartphone, I could drag and drop a file there. So I have a file that's for A+ office supplies. It's a copy of an invoice. It's a PDF. I'm going to just drag and drop it here. And after I drop it on the drop zone, it's going to attach it to the record. I do have attachment types. I could say this is a vendor invoice. That drop down is something you define as for your organization of what choices you want there. And then I could submit or save. Save would be I don't want to necessarily submit it yet. I want to come back, review it one more time before I submit it. If I submit it, it's off and it's following that approval rule to get approved and ultimately go to accounting. So that's the first feature I wanted to show you within expense management, and that's really the ability to manage these company-issued credit cards, which are often a challenge, often very difficult to get the paperwork to support the transactions to the accounting office. They're using the credit card one day, you're paying the bill down the road. So this kind of links that whole process together and allows you to have an approval flow. The other feature of expense management is to put in an invoice request. So just like I put in my credit card, I could come in here and I could put in an invoice request. The only difference is the credit card charge was downloaded from the credit card. The invoice request is basically starting out with me, putting in the request. Same type of thing where I could come in here and I have approval rules and I can drag and drop supporting attachments. So this would be a way to really almost do a check request or a pre-invoice request, gets routed for approval, and ultimately goes to accounting to be paid. So that's the second feature of expense management. And then the third feature is if I am an approver, where I can have pending charges, which would come from the credit card routing, or I can have pending a request, which comes from the invoice request routing. So if I go into my pending items, I have 4 here, I can look at what I need to approve or at least need to review, and I can either approve or reject, and I have the capability to save as well if I start working on it but want to come back to it. And then at the bottom of the screen, here's the history of changes. So it's going to keep this log of changes, so I have supporting documentation for what routings it went through, who touched it throughout the process. So nice, again, a new module, seems to save a lot of organizations a lot of time. It has credit card charges, invoice requests, and approvals. Now this is a separate license from the main full user license or view-only licenses. It comes in 10 packs of users, just like view-only licenses, at a fraction of a cost of the full user. So very nice. If you have that challenge today of managing these types of transactions, expense management may be the answer for you. Well, our goal today was really to look at how Financial Edge NXT can help us manage our projects and grants within our organization. And we really started that out by looking at the structure of Financial Edge NXT to see that we could track an account, we can also track a project, and we can track a grant. We have the capability to track projects and grants, or just projects if we only have a singular need. It gives us the ability, if we have both projects and grants, to have grants that fund multiple projects or projects that are funded by multiple grants. So that relationship is built in as you record transactions into Financial Edge NXT. We showed you the capability of dashboards within NXT, the ability for users to really do analysis directly on the system using dashboards. Dashboards allowed us to drill back to supporting documentation all the way back to, in some cases, supporting transactions. We also looked at lists within Financial Edge NXT for both projects and grants. This was a way for us to really query information. Each user could personalize those lists with the columns of information they want. They could do filters. They could also rearrange or sort by columns as well. When we got into a project or grant, we opened up the record. The record had multiple tiles. These tiles allowed us to track attachments, actions, notes, and other information specific and custom information specific about our grants and projects. We went from there into reports to show how we ultimately can report out on these projects and grants. We ran a report that was on a grant term for multiple grant years, giving us the analysis of budget and actual and a variance, different ways to really group accounts on the rows of the report. We talked about that that's using the chart organizer. The chart organizer are the layouts for reports. So the feature of Financial Edge NXT gives you that ability that the reports and the layouts are separate from one another, giving you the ability to run the same report with different layouts and to create multiple layouts based on who is the recipient of the report. In many cases, grantors might want you to report in a prescribed format to them, which you can match using the chart organizers. From there, we went into budgeting and we showed how you can budget for projects and grants, so the combination of account, project, and grant. You can key those budgets directly into the system, or you can use a tool, that add-in tool that we have in Microsoft Excel to do budgets directly in Excel and edit budgets directly in Excel, and also to do journal entries within Excel. From there, we moved into expense management, our newest module, which allowed users of credit cards to be able to download their own charges, add supporting documentation, add copies of invoices, put in detailed notes and detailed descriptions, and really pick the project and or grant that the charge related to, since they're the closest to the charge. This really helps us create efficiencies. Not waiting for paper to arrive in the accounting office really puts the whole organization on the same page, and it's possible to do that for both credit card charges and invoice requests. So hopefully you saw a lot of different ways Financial Edge NXT can help you manage your projects and grants. At Capital Business Solutions, we have these webinars on a periodic basis. We appreciate you joining today, and please let us know if you have any additional questions. Thank you and enjoy your day.